Suranandana Brajajarandana Suranandana Brajajarandana Suranandana Brajajarandana Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Shata Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Shata Srimad Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Gita Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Shamaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Jyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So we're reading from, I think there was a little bit of confusion yesterday. I'm going to read through Canto 3, Chapter 15, Text 23, before going into Text 24, or 22. 23. What's on the board there? 24. That's 24. So I'll read 23 first. Papashiyu Vapishu vidruma tatasva amalam prito amalam tapsu presyan vita nijavane tulasibir isam abarakati Svalakam, Unasam, Iksha, Vakram, Uche Sitam, Bhagavateti, Amatanga, Yashtrihi, and word for word, Vapishu, in the ponds, Bidruma, made of coral, Tatashu, banks. Amala, transparent. Amrita, nectarine. Apsu, water. Preshya Anvita, surrounded by maidservants. Nijavane, in her own garden. Tulasi bihi, with Tulasi. Isham, the Supreme Lord. Apayarachi, worship. Sa'alakam, with her face decorated with tilak. Unasam, raised nose. Iksha, by seeing. Vaktram, face. Uchesitam, being kissed. Bhagavata, by the Supreme Lord. Iti, thus. Amata, thought. Anga, O demigods. Yat-shrihi, whose beauty. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The goddess of fortune, the goddesses of fortune worship the Lord in their own gardens by offering tulsi leaves on the coral-paved banks of transcendental reservoirs of water. While offering worship of the Lord, they can see on the water the reflection of their beautiful faces with raised noses, and it appears that they have become more beautiful because of the Lord's kissing their faces. Responsibly, the goddesses of fortune worship the Lord in their own gardens by offering tulsi leaves on coral-paved banks of transcendental reservoirs of water. While offering worship to the Lord, they can see on the water the reflection of their beautiful faces with raised noses, and it appears that they have become more beautiful because of the Lord's kissing their faces. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Generally, when a woman is kissed by her husband, her face becomes more beautiful. In Vaikuntha also, although the goddess of fortune is naturally as beautiful as can be imagined, she nevertheless awaits the kissing of the Lord to make her face more beautiful. The beautiful face of the goddess of fortune appears in ponds of transcendental crystal water when she worships the Lord with tulsi leaves in her garden. The verse again by Srila Prabhupada, the goddesses of fortune worship of the Lord in their own gardens by offering tulsi leaves on the coral-paved banks of transcendental reservoirs of water. While offering worship to the Lord, they can see on the water the reflection of their beautiful faces with raised noses, and it appears that they have become more beautiful because of the Lord's kissing their faces. Text 23. Yan, repeat, yan, na, prajantya, prajanti, agabhido, rachana nuvadat, trinvanti, ye, nya vishayaha, kukata, matigataha, matignihi, yas, tu, shruta, hatta bhagair, Nibir Atasaras Tams Tan Kshipanti Asaraneshu Tamashu Hanta Yat repeat Yat Vaikuntha Na never Rajanti approach Aga Vida of the vanquisher of all kinds of sins. Rachana of the creation. Anuvadat then narrations. Shrinvanti here. Ye those who. Anya other. Vishayaha subject matter. Kukataha bad words. Matignihi killing intelligence. Ya which to but. Shrutaha are heard. Hata bagai unfortunate. Arbi by men. Ata taken away. Saraha values of life. Tan such persons. Kshipanti are thrown. Anuraneshu devoid of all shelter. Tamasu in the darkest part of material existence. Hanta alas. It is very much regrettable, translation, it is very much regrettable that unfortunate people do not discuss the discrepancies of the Vaikuntha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear, which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who gave up the topics of Vaikuntha and take to talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest region of ignorance. It is very much regrettable, repeat, that unfortunate people do not discuss the descriptions of the Vaikuntha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear and which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who give up the topics of Vaikuntha and take to talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest regions of ignorance. The most fortunate persons are the impersonalists who cannot understand the transcendental variegatedness of the spiritual world. They are afraid to talk about the beauty of the Vaikuntha planets because they think that variegatedness must be material. Such impersonalists think that the spiritual world is completely void, or in other words, that there is no variegatedness. The mentality is described herein as ku kata, mati gnihi, intelligence bewildered by unworthy words. The philosophies of voidness and of the impersonal situation of the spiritual world are condemned here because they bewilder one's intelligence. How can the impersonalist and the void philosophers think of the material world? The material world which is full of variegatedness, and thus they say that there is no variegatedness in the spiritual world. It is said that the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So unless there is variegatedness in the spiritual world, how can there be temporary variegatedness in the material world? That one can transcend the material world does not imply that there is no transcendental variegatedness. Here in the Bhagavatam, in this verse particularly, it is stressed that people who try to discuss and understand the real position, spiritual nature of the spiritual sky and the Vaikunthas are fortunate. The variegatedness of the Vaikuntha planets is described in relation to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. But instead of trying to understand the spiritual abode and the spiritual activities of the Lord, people are more interested in politics and economic developments. They hold many conventions, meetings, and discussions to solve the problems of this worldly situation, where they can remain for only a few years. But they are not interested in understanding the spiritual situation of the Vaikuntha world. If they are at all fortunate, they become interested in going back home, back to Godhead. But unless they understand the spiritual world, they rot in this material darkness continuously. Is that on the board? I'm just going to read the next text. Ye biar hitam, repeat. Ye biar hitam, api cha na nigatam, prapana jnanam cha tattva vishayam saha sahadharman yatra naradanam bhagavato vitranti amusha samoha vitalabhata vitala bhata mayaya te ye, repeat, ye, those persons, abhyarhitam, desired, api, certainly, cha, and naha, by us, Brahma and other demigods, nrigatim, the human form of life, prapanaha, have attained, jnanam, knowledge, cha, and tattvatashyam, tattvavishayam, subject matter about the absolute truth, saha, sahadharmam, along with religious principles, yatra, where, na, not, aradhanam, worship, bhagavataha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, vitaranti, perform, amusha, of the Supreme Lord, samohita, being bewildered, vitaya, all-pervading, bhatta, alas, mayaya, by the influence of the illusory energy, te, Lord Brahma said, my dear demigods, the human form of life is of such importance that we also desire to have such life. For in the human form, one can attain perfect religious truth and knowledge. If one in this human form of life does not understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his abode, it is to be understood that it is very much affected by the influence of external nature. Purport. Brahmaji condemns very vehemently the condition of the human being who does not take interest in the personality of Godhead and his transcendental abode, Vaikuntha. The human form of life is desired. The human form of life is desired even by Brahmaji. Brahma and other demigods have much better material bodies than human beings, yet the demigods, including Brahma, nevertheless desire to attain the human form of life, because it is specifically meant for the living entity, who can obtain transcendental knowledge and religious perfection. It is not possible to go back to Godhead in one life, but in the human form, one should at least understand that the goal of life and begin Krishna consciousness. It is said that the human form is a great boon, because it is the most suitable boat for crossing over the nescience ocean. The spiritual master is considered to be the most able captain of the boat, and the information from the scriptures is the favorable wind for floating over the ocean of nescience. The human being who does not take advantage of these facilities in this life is committing suicide. Therefore, one who does not begin Krishna consciousness in the human form of life loses his life to the influence of the illusory energy. Brahma regrets the situation of such human being. So the verse again says, It is very much regrettable that unfortunate people do not discuss the description of Vaikuntha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear and which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who give up the topics of Vaikuntha and take to talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest region of ignorance. And now I'm going to comment on this verse because of the somewhat confusing nature of what happened the day before. This indicates that devotees can be superior to demigods. Even though demigods have a very long-lasting life, like Brahma's a day is 8,400,000,000 years. That's just 12 hours. And that times 1,000 is equal to Brahma's life. Even though he has a very long life and all the demigods have very comfortable positions, they are not equal to devotees of the Lord. So it has been said that when Prahlad was watching his father being dispatched by Hiranyakashipu, that he was importuned by Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva to pacify the Lord because he was very angry after killing Hiranyakashipu. So this is an indication that the devotee of the Lord is superior to even the demigods. Even though the demigods have great facilities, they have to, most of them have to return to this material world. So in that sense, the Prahlad Maharaj, who is one of the 12 Mahajans, is superior to the demigods like Lord Brahma. Once I was given a sum of money to take to India to pray to one of the demigods that a certain person of this gentleman's acquaintance would win in a competition. And he gave me, the friend gave me a sum of money, of cash, of about 200 or 300 pounds. And so the ceremony was held in the backyard of a devotee somewhere near Delhi. And I don't know if the person won the competition, but we exercised the prayers and went ahead with the worship. So the second canto explains what is worship of the demigods. And a lot of people worship these demigods to attain various things, and they're detailed as to which demigod awards which benedictions. But it's not recommended for devotees of Krishna to worship the demigods. They all worship demigods. One devotee wrote to Prabhupada and said that he wanted to worship Ganesh. And Prabhupada said, well, if you give me thousands of dollars every month, you can worship Ganesh. But he indirectly was saying, don't do that. Don't worship Ganesh. Worship Krishna. Because worshiping of the demigods is imperfect. And even though the Bhagavatam states what benefits can be gotten by worshiping different demigods, because we do have to know everything, even though we don't practice everything, he recommends that if we're going to worship somebody, we have to worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's also stated by Prabhupada, I think it's the third canto, first chapter, that everybody is different. And in this, in one of the purports to, I think it's the verse 41 in the third chapter of the first canto, he says that we should always remember the maxim that one man's food is another man's poison. In other words, everyone is an individual. At some earlier point when I was in, I think, high school, I studied the fact that for example, every snowflake has a unique pattern. Each snowflake has a certain pattern to it, and each one is unique. So every individual is unique. So this is another way of saying that one man's food is another man's poison. So this is said in the Bhagavatam, and it's repeated over 26 times in different books of Srila Prabhupada. One man's poison is another man's. One man's food is another man's poison. It's his way of saying that we're all individuals, and what is an obvious factor in one individual is not an obvious factor in the other individual. And in other places, he doesn't mention this. That's 26 mentions in Prabhupada's books. There are other mentions of it by in lectures and morning walks and room conversations. But the Prabhupada has also said that that everyone has glories and everyone has faults. So we can even see within the life of Lord Brahma, even though he's a very great personality, knows that what we are all thinking, very advanced, he has faults. Even though he has a very long life and a very comfortable existence, he has faults. And there's one instance that's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam where he began to run after his own daughter because of lust. He actually discarded this particular body because he's a very powerful demigod, and in a future kalpa he obtained he didn't have that lusty desire, but he had that desire because he's a demigod, and a demigod is for the most part, demigods are imperfect, and whatever they do, they have faults, they have glories. And the devotees of Krishna who have become very advanced and who are very committed to Krishna consciousness, they don't suffer from faults. They're almost perfect beings. In some of the cases, they are perfect beings. And Prabhupada has even rescued some of these people, even though as Lord Chaitanya, he decried speaking with people who were like kings and moneylenders and people like that. But if on the plea or the importunities of different devotees, sometimes he intervened and helped these devotees, although he generally didn't do it, but that was his life. So devotees of God are superior to the demigods, and they don't have to return to this material world. So the idea is that we have to try to attain the same advanced nature that we see in so many devotees, like the 6 Goswamis and other like Prabhupada Saraswati, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and others, many others, who are mentioned in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, who are great devotees. They had special abilities. They were always their eyes were always wet with tears. They were dreaming about Krishna. They were always thinking about Krishna. They were never forgetting Krishna. So these people are superior to the demigods, who are also very advanced, and they think of Krishna all the time. But devotees of Krishna, Vaishnavas, are superior to even the people of the demigods. So I'll read the verse once again. It is very much regrettable that unfortunate people do not discuss the descriptions of the Vaikuntha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear and which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who give up the topics of Vaikuntha, and talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest regions of ignorance. So on various occasions we have been advised not to read novels, newspapers, and other literatures which are full of talks of the mundane world. People are so addicted to talks of the material world, they think that everything is improving, that we're going to be able to live for hundreds of years, that we're going to be able to talk in a low voice all over the world, which we're sort of doing now with the internet and all that. People are generally discoursing about, in the United Nations, for example, there's a lot of talk about world peace, but there is no world peace. There's a lot of fighting going on in various parts of the world, in Russia, in India, in South India. There's battles going on between people of different origins in different states. So there's talk and activity that make people very unconscious of spiritually advancing themselves. And Prabhupada has told us that the only things worth speaking about are things that are related to Krishna. Like the battlefield of Kurukshetra, for example, in one way is just another piece of land. But because Krishna walked on that field, it has a special significance, and it's worthy of discussing the battle of Kurukshetra and the grounds of Kurukshetra. So these are some of the ways that people talk of Krishna. So we'll probably have to end right here. Are there any questions? I'll read the verse again, the last verse that I talked about. It is very much regrettable that unfortunate people do not discuss the descriptions of the Vaikuntha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear and which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who give up the topics of Vaikuntha and talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest region of ignorance. Sometimes it is asked why, if Krishna is all good, why are there demons, and why are there people who talk of things that are not related to Krishna? And one of the most amazing things about Krishna is that he provides intelligence for even those people to, and especially in Kali Yuga, to talk of things that aren't related to Krishna. But Krishna is very unique, and he has uncommon activities and uncommon pastimes. So in one sense, even though God is good, he lets people have their freedom, and this freedom can be used or abused. It's abused when they talk about, when they forget Krishna. It's like Prabhupada was saying to one of the airline pilots when he was flying around the world, what is evil, he was asked, and his response was, evil is the backside of God, or the backside of a devotee. So these are some of the points that make the Krishna conscious philosophy very difficult to understand and very sophisticated. These very intimate pastimes were discussed with impersonalists or people of the material world by Lord Chaitanya. But when it came to his very close and intimate disciples, he discussed the intimate pastimes of Krishna and Radharani. So do you have any comments or questions on any of this? Yes, go ahead.
Why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people?
Why do good things happen to bad people?
And bad things happen to good people. Yeah.
Sometimes bad people have a good side. As Prabhupada said, there are glories and there are faults in all people. So even though there are people that are considered demonic or bad, they sometimes say something good. Just like William Shakespeare, he was always writing plays about nonsense. But every once in a while he would say something that was almost like Vedic literature. And even Prabhupada quotes one thing that Shakespeare said, that the poet, the lover, and the madman are very similar. And the quotation appears in one of the Shakespearean plays, I think it's in As You Like It, where he says the poet, the lover, and the madman are all compact in mind. And that's, in the Veda base, that particular play and the act and the scene are mentioned. That was actually written by a poet who was completely materialistic. And it's said that he and another well-known composer named Franz Liszt, a German composer, later in life they retired and became almost sannyasis. They gave up the material world and they lived in monasteries. So sometimes, not very often, but good things can happen to bad people.
What about, like, when a DT had the two sons, Nakashipu and Hiranyaksha?
Well, both of them were devotees in their past lives, so they were unique. And we have this picture on the altar of Hiranyakashipu sitting on the throne of one of them, because he was a gatekeeper in Vaikuntha in a previous life. So it's possible that devotees can become demons and demons can become devotees, as they did in their past. So if you understand the principle of transmigration of the soul, even bad people can become devotees. They not only can say good things happen, but they can become devoted to Krishna in another life. Yes?
Say thank you.
This gentleman?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can pass the microphone back.
I probably don't need it.
Pardon?
Okay. All right.
Hi. I think I might have arrived late, so maybe I lost a part. I would like to ask, why are demigod considered imperfect, and what do we mean as imperfection?
Well, demigods are called demi because that means part or half. they're not fully, most of them are not fully Krishna conscious. They're Krishna conscious, they believe in Krishna, but most of them have to return to this material world. And as it is said in the verse, the denizens of the material world, human beings, they have an advantage over the demigods, because in the human form of life, one can become a Vaishnava, or like Prahlad Maharaj, like one of the Mahajans, or Bhishma. They can become perfect in this lifetime. So in that way, they're more advanced than the demigods. And the people like Brahma and other demigods pray to become human beings, because the human beings is the most suitable form of life for going back to Godhead, according to this verse. So that's a prayer that all of us should engage in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
Thank you for the class, Maharaj. You said that Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha was maybe devotees in the past lives in Vaikuntha, but then they fell down. So does that mean that we could, like, we came from Vaikuntha maybe instead of Vrindavan, because then we fell down from there instead?
Well, in Bhagavad Gita it said that once one understands the nature of Krishna's appearance and activities, one doesn't come back to the material world. So one of the great mysteries of Krishna consciousness is how and why there is a material world, which is only 1/4 of the whole creation. But it doesn't mean that every human being who's a demon was in Vaikuntha before. But it's also said by Srila Prabhupada in many places, in conversations and in lectures and in books, that non-Krishna consciousness is actually forgetfulness of Krishna. So in that way we can say that we were spiritually Krishna conscious at one time. It doesn't say that we were in the spiritual world. The spiritual world is different from and the Vaikuntha world are different from the palaces that Krishna personally occupied. It's one thing to go into a kingdom, but it's another thing to go into the home of the king. So that's the difference between Krishna Loka and Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is a kind of a general term, like liberation or emancipation or salvation. But it entails return to the material world. But once one goes back to Krishna, it is said that if one fully understands Krishna and his activities and the nature of his birth, one doesn't ever come back to this material world. Hare Krishna. Yes? Ron?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So is the reason that the demigods never become devotees just because of the unbelievable opulence that they're surrounded by?
My understanding is that not that they never become devotees. Some do become devotees, and some do not come back to the material world. But even those who come to the material world eventually make their way back to either Vaikuntha or the impersonal realization that they were in before, like as demigods, or they can go back to Krishna Loka and become devotees of the Lord fully. So it's not that they all have the same destination. Just being a demigod doesn't necessarily mean that one is automatically going to go back to Godhead. Even though many demigods pray to enter the human form of life. Kalir dosha nidherajan astiheka mahaguna. It is said to Maharaj, or by Maharaj Yudhisthira, that in Kali Yuga, it's a very, very retrograde and very miserable place to be. But the one advantage is that one can, just by chanting Hare Krishna, go back to Godhead. One doesn't have to engage in difficult forms of worship. One can just chant Hare Krishna and get the same effects that were done in prior yugas, like temple worship and meditation, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions or comments, yes, one more.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class, Maharaja. My question is, are there any circumstances that we can actually approach demigods and ask for something?
Well, many people do. In fact, as far as I know, most people who believe in demigods worship them because they want certain benedictions. Like young women generally worship Katyani to get a good husband. And there's a whole list of what benefits accrue from worshiping different demigods. Worship the sun, worship Indra, worship Chandra, and so on, and what benefits can be realized by that form of worship. But Prabhupada certainly does not recommend that form of worship. It is a form of worship, but if Krishna is meditated upon, that is perfection, and never forgotten. That's perfect meditation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything else? I think that's all. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.